I would make such a mess. Anyway, Pinchas is the son of Eleazar, who we told you about, who's the son of Aharon, and he's a Kohen Gadol now. And he's turned his back my wrath from Bnei Israel by displaying among them the passion for me, so that I did not wipe out Am Yisrael, my passion. This it says in the day's Torah reading. Now, what's interesting about this is God was really mad, and they were, everybody got sick. I don't think it was COVID, but it was worse. People were dying. But Pinchas, because of what he did, God turned his wrath away from Bnei Israel and stopped this plague that was going on. I know we all heard of the Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, Oliver Shalom, but he had a lot to say about feeling anger towards God. And his basic point is that anger towards God is much better than ignoring God. Indifference is much worse than anger. So for a Jew to believe in God and that God is good, for a Jew to protest against God, that's still good. But simply ignoring God, that ain't so good at all. That's not good. Anger, yes. Protest, yes. Affirmation, yes. But indifference, no way. That's the worst you can do. In some other religions, anger towards God is either frowned upon or forbidden, with capital punishment being ascribed to the heretic. So Judaism, by way of contrast, not only allows us to be angry at God, but we have a rich tradition of protesting the Holy One's words and actions. From the Torah itself, we know that Abraham and Moshe both confronted and showed disagreement with God. What about us? We have a loss. Somebody who's very dear to us seems to die a tragic death for no reason. How about the war in Israel, October 7th? How about that? How about the Holocaust? People got very angry with God on those days, and should. But according to the Talmud in Sanhedrin 44a, both Yehoshua and Pinchas protested when God vengefully killed members of Bnei Israel in response to their rejection of God. They were angry, both Yehoshua and Pinchas. So regarding Pinchas, Rabbi Eliezer teaches that he scolded God for killing 24,000 of Bnei Israel. And when it was only necessary to kill Zimri and Cosby, those are the men and the woman who were co-joined in front of the Ohel Moed, God took the lives of 24,000 of Bnei Israel with this plague. And after all, it was Zimri, the man of Bnei Israel, and Cosby, the Midianite woman, who Pinchas zealously killed for having public sex in the vicinity of the sacred Ohel Moed. He killed them. But what did the rest of the Bnei Israel do? They shouldn't have been. I mean, they're mad. Pinchas is mad. Yehoshua is mad at God. How could you do this? Then it says, then stood up Pinchas and executed judgment. And the Hebrew word for that is vayafalel. And the plague was stayed. And you hear this in Psalm 106, verse 30. And Rabbi Eliezer says, and he portrayed vayitpalel is not stated rather, and he executed judgment. Vayifalel is stated, which teaches that he entered into a judgment together with his creator. How did he do this? He came and cast Zimri and Cosby down before the eyes of God and said to him, Master of the universe, was it because of these sinners that 24,000 members of Bnei Israel fell? As it is written, and those that died by the plague were 24,000. Oh, Pinchas was angry. We normally think of Pinchas as the Kohen who lost his temper. A lot of people don't understand. How do you reward zealousness? How do you do that? But he was rewarded because he stabbed two sinners through their bellies without seeking Moshe's approval. He did it on his own. He wasn't supposed to do that, but he did it. And then he did it. And then when he did it, the plague stopped. So that passage turns out that this passage turns that whole notion on its head. Pinchas essentially says to God, "Oh, you think I lost my temper? Ha ha, that's rich. What about you and your temper?" That's what he's doing. That's what he's saying to God. So, although we are allowed to be angry at God, we are nonetheless required to accept God's judgments, no matter unfair they may seem. We can get angry, but we have no choice but to accept it. After all, the notion of fairness, and this, I say this all the time, and people are always saying, it's not fair. It's not. You look in the Tanakh. I don't care. You read the Tanakh 100 times. Do a search for the word fair, and you won't find it. Nowhere in the entire Jewish Bible is there any notion of fairness. This is a man-made notion, idealistic notion. It don't exist. It don't exist in nature. Is it fair when a hurricane comes and tears down the houses and a tornado? Is it fair when floods rage? Is that fair? That's nature. So when we hear of a death, when somebody dies, you know what we do? We make a blessing. The blessing is 3 words: Baruch Dayan HaEmet, which means blessed is the judge of truth. During a Jewish funeral, one often hears the prayer known as a prayer known which means justification of judgment. Justification of judgment. So anger towards God is allowed, but acceptance must follow sooner or later for our own sake. Yep, we can get angry, but eventually we have to deal with our own understanding of things. And we can't get angry. We can't stay angry at God. We can't put God and ignore God. But failing to accept what has happened is a recipe for eternal spiritual pain. We will remain in pain and even trauma. And we know people don't always accept what happens. That's why they make Xanax and other pills that help. So acceptance leads to peace, shalom, completeness. Peace leads to memory, and memory leads to gratitude for what we once had. Gratitude is everything. Even love itself is merely an expression of merely an expression of thankfulness. And as I always say at the grave, so many of you have heard me say it. You're standing in front of the grave of your loved one, and you have to say Kaddish. And nobody's allowed to join you, only the leader of the funeral, me in this case. I lead them in Kaddish, but I'm not saying it. And I tell them, look at the words of the Kaddish. What is Kaddish? It's a list of how wonderful God is. Stupendous, magnificent, and blah, blah, There's nothing about death. Nothing. It's a statement of how much we understand how great God is. And then at the end, it asks for peace. And I say, why is it that we do this? Isn't it mean to make people stand before the grave of their loved one who they just lost and say how wonderful God is? Isn't it mean? Well, maybe. And then I asked them this. And this is true. Last week, somebody won, $30 million in the lottery here in New Jersey? Somebody in California a few months back won $2.8 billion. One person didn't have to share it. And even if they were atheists, what do you think they said when they saw they won that kind of money? And if you don't think they said, thank God, even if they were absolute atheists, I think you're missing the point. And the people that you're saying this Kaddish for, the loved one, you're not saying Kaddish because they died. You're saying Kaddish because they were in your life. You won the lottery. And it's much more than money, the kind of lottery you win. And that's why love itself is merely an expression of thankfulness. And loving God is the most thankful thing we can do. And with that, I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom